I want to thank all of you for joining us. My name is Kent McGuire. I head up the education work at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. I just want to say that all that motivates our work is a firm belief that education generates both individual and collective benefits. And that's why I'm so happy that we are here to do this session. On this stage are three of our grantees. This session is mostly an opportunity for you to hear from and interact with them. But, and we'll do that for the next hour. I do want some questions from the audience. They do need to be questions. And we'll try maybe do that a couple of times. If it goes well the first time, we may try it again. That's what I want to say about that. But let me make just a few quick points to set the stage for the conversation that we're going to have. First thing I want to say is that our democracy simply doesn't work well when people aren't engaged in it, when people don't trust that they're a part of it. People are much less likely to be engaged if they neither understand how our democracy works or feel they've been excluded from participating in it. And the third thing I want to say is that schools, while not the only platform for helping people, especially young people, understand how our constitutional democracy works, they're an ideal setting for accomplishing that. And that's why we're here, because one way or another, we need to figure out how to get more civic learning happening. We need to understand or figure out how to make schools more democratic institutions. And we need a sense of what it looks like when that's done well. So, with that, I want to start by asking each of our panelists to take a few minutes to talk about their organizations, and what they do. And I'll just start, Renee, with you, since you're right next to me.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Vernee Green, and I have the privilege of being the CEO of MCFA Challenge, which is a national civic engagement organization. We were founded in Chicago and now work in about 15 sites across the country. I bring to this work, and I have to say it because we'll talk a lot about teachers. I'm a former Chicago public school teacher. I taught middle school social studies. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And more than I love what I did is I love who my students are today. So I was a teacher 20 years ago, and so can really truly see the impact of the work from when I was in the classroom. Our work at MCFA Challenge, we approach in two ways. We look at a broad, sort of macro level approach to civic education by working with schools and school districts and administrators to create, classrooms as well as school communities that are really focused on civic education. And then in some of our major cities, we take a deeper approach, more of a micro approach, in working with students, where we have these student advisory councils and youth councils, where we bring young people to people in positions of power and encourage our young people, as well as encourage the adults, to listen to what those young people have to say as we try to bring across change, not only in school settings, but across our regions and across our country.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Clay Roy. I'm the CEO of Generation Citizen, and we were founded 14 years ago by college students who recognized that the way in which civics education is typically taught, particularly in under-resourced schools, was rote memorization and asking young people to relate to their civic present by focusing on our historical past, and a past in which folks who looked like them were not necessarily, didn't belong fully in our democracy. And so our approach to civics education is that young people learn civics best by doing civics. So we bring a curriculum, teacher training, and teacher coaching into partnerships with school districts across 8 states across the country. And over the course of a semester, middle school or high school students really get a deep understanding about how local government works by working together to make change on an issue that matters to them. Student-centered, project-based learning applied to civics education that is also leveraging students' natural disposition to care about their friends and to encourage them to look within their own lived experience and pair that with a set of important civic skills around critical thinking, around participatory research, around high-quality communication and teamwork skills that enable them in the course of a semester to be part of making lasting change in their communities on issues like mental health, on issues like criminal justice and issues of punishment in their communities, on issues of economics, and on issues like their school cell phone policy. And so we're really proud to be engaging students across many different communities in this work. We also engage in policy work so that we can make sure that across the country, whether or not school districts want to partner with Generation Citizen or Mikva Challenge or any organization, or whether teachers want to develop their own approach to hands-on civic learning. We do advocacy work to ensure that that is still legal and possible around the country, and we know the attacks on student voice, and so it's important that we continue to engage in advocacy work to support that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carlos Moreno. I have the honor of serving as the co-executive director for Big Picture Learning. We are an organization that is focused on activating the power and potential of student-centered real-world learning. Now, that takes form, lots of forms for us as an organization through a variety of different initiatives that range from after-school work that we engage with, leadership work at the district and state levels. But what we're probably most known for is our schools across the United States and overseas. We have a little over 100 schools across 27 states and another 100 schools in 13 countries outside of the US that employ the big picture learning design that is heavily focused on allowing young people to explore their interests and passions in the real world in the form of internships, community projects, and community engagement opportunities. Connected to that work, our young people are asked when they're engaging in those internships to begin thinking about a real world problem that they'd like to address through their internship work. And that can range from something that's very specific to the context of that internship site because it's something that they're passionate or curious about. But oftentimes what happens is that it blossoms well beyond that formal internship site, and they start thinking more broadly about the other communal challenges, societal issues that affect their communities, communities that they care for, and communities that are directly connected to them in a variety of ways.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. So, of late, we have been witness to a steady stream of attacks on the public schools, whether it's in the form of book bans or restrictions on curriculum or what teachers can teach. I just would like each of you, since you all work in or with the schools, to talk for a bit about the impact that's having on students especially, and also on educators? Well, I'll let Liz go first.
Thanks, Kent, for this question. And it is incredibly important that at an event like this, where we are talking about innovation and opportunity and creativity in the areas of education, and knowing that we have such assets in the rising generation and all the talent they bring, it is such a shame to know that we have, at the same time, in too many state capitals across this country, a set of a policy direction that seeks to narrow the possibility of what teachers and students can do in the social studies classroom. And that's what's taking place right now. So, I think this is a moment in which the crises of our democracy that you talked about, which has been part of a significant conversation, certainly since 2020, but before that, has meant there has been more energy and fear about what could be happening in our classrooms. That has led to the anti-critical race theory movement, also an anti-action civics movement, and many others. At the very same time, we are also seeing a number of education leaders, superintendents, and state policymakers who are recognizing that this is a time to invest more in high-quality, student-centered civic learning. And so I'm going to share in a moment one of the things that concerns me greatly, but I want to highlight the fact that in a number of states, blue, red, and purple, if you're focused on politics, we are seeing investment in high-quality civics education and in ethnic studies, which in terms of culturally responsive pedagogy is so important, I think, aligned with the work we're talking about in civics. But at the same time, we're sitting here in the wonderful state of Texas, and the work that we are talking about is sharply curtailed in this state. And in fact, students may not be in a class for credit where they are encouraged to contact an elected official as a part of their curriculum. And so that means that when you are engaging young people in civic education, they can connect with the textbook, they can connect with their peers, and yes, they can advocate to a principal or a superintendent. But if they identify an issue that concerns them around youth homelessness, an issue related to what's going on with local infrastructure or putting up a stop sign in front of a local park, they can't contact the mayor. They can't contact, as a part of their class, local elected officials in their town who they might know, with a rigorous and academically supported approach to connecting what matters to them with their development of civic skills and knowledge. And that's a shame. It's a shame for the students of Texas, and it's a shame in all of the states, not only where you see attacks on civics education directly, but the attacks that are taking place around student voice and discussion of identity in the classroom, and the attacks on so-called critical race theory. Those narrow what some teachers feel comfortable teaching, it narrows what some principals are comfortable saying yes to, and yes, it narrows what students feel like they can say, or the books that they can ask for. And so I think the moment that we're in, even if only one state bans this kind of work, the ripple effects are real and have a result of limiting what our incredible students can do.
So, Renee, I'm going to ask you in a minute to talk about how this environment or climate impacts your work, but I want to go to Carlos. I have seen Carlos's kids in action. I've watched them ask big questions to political leaders and public officials. And I'm just curious what Big Picture does to try to help kids find their voice and agency in the midst of these kinds of conditions.
Yeah, we as an organization have adopted wholeheartedly the well-known Yeats quote that education is not the filling of a pail, but a lighting of a fire. And that we see each one of our young people when they enter our doors, not from a deficit perspective, right? But we see all the gifts and the brilliance despite of whatever their the files might say, like, this is, you're brilliant, and we're going to love on you and lift you up, and we're going to allow you to pursue passionately things that you're curious about. And what we've heard from students pretty loudly is that they want us to teach them how to have the difficult conversations and to come up with better legacy solutions for some of the things happening in their communities. So one of the things that is just a formal structure of the big picture learning design is the advisory model. I know a lot of schools employ an advisory model. It is incredibly important. And our advisors remain with their cohort of students for their 4 years of high school. We are predominantly a high school design. We have a couple of K-8 schools and middle schools, but predominantly a high school design. And having that advisory time and that adult that is there to support you through that learning experience also includes facilitating some really hard and honest conversations about what it is that the young people are experiencing day in and day out. What are the things that they're curious about? What are they experiencing at their internships? What are some of the experiences that their family members have had? And through that, learning what actions they can take, right? And not saying that because they're young people or because they're children, right, that their voices do not count. We have seen that every movement in this country, in the history of this country, there have been young people at the forefront of it. So for us, it's not necessarily to say this is what you should be doing, but here's an opportunity to facilitate the questions that you have, the burning desire that you have to address these injustices that exist, while also learning about what's happening in the world that surrounds you.
Okay, Renee, what about the MCFA Challenge? You've taken kids down to D.C. to engage directly in Washington. You've got them organized to take issues up right there in your own backyard in Chicago. How is this time, what kind of challenges does it present for your work?
Yeah, it presents a great deal. Actually, a couple things that Carlos mentioned that I just want to grab. One, light a fire. And what I love about the work is that we are asking students very similar questions. What are the issues you are most concerned about, and what do you think people should do about it? And we have a part in our curriculum that we call Project Soapbox, where students literally stand on their stage and they talk about that issue. And we're lighting fires, starting actually in some cities in kindergarten, where we're asking them, what's the most important thing? And they can answer it. And my favorite example is a third grader who said, so many people are lactose intolerant in this country, but the school forces us to take milk every single day. And every day we're wasting milk. We're pouring milk down the sink. What could we be using that money for? Really named a problem, named also like the risk of having that problem. And we were able to put her in a forum where the chancellor of schools was in that room in New York City. And so being able to say, here is somebody who can do something about that issue, they're already on fire. The risk is that, one, if our curriculum is banned, which in some states, again, we cannot operate here, how many students are missing the opportunity to have that spark lit for them? Because if you start in third grade, and the chancellor of schools, by the way, who then invited that young person back to come and talk to the leadership of New York City Public Schools, that young lady is never gonna stop talking, ever. And we don't want her to. So if we are not lighting the spark and lighting the spark early, we're missing opportunities for young people to deliver. The other thing that we are losing, and one of the biggest risks, is teachers, particularly since the pandemic, are leaving the classroom. Many because they don't feel safe They don't feel like if I bring this issue up, it's polarizing. Someone may go to a school board meeting and talk about something that is happening in our classroom. So we're losing talent. We're losing talent in our schools, and students are missing those opportunities to take an issue. It starts with milk. It turns to this person has become an attorney or a community organizer or just a really good citizen. So I feel like the risk that we have, the barriers that we have when our work is not able to be permitted, or we're not able to grow, or teachers who would be able to execute decide, I want a safer career, our country is forever changed as a result of decisions that we are making right now.
I want to come back to the teacher support question, but I want to make sure we've fully exhausted this question of what the students want and need. And so, Liz, I wonder if you could just elaborate on that. If you sort of put ourselves in the shoes of kids, talk about how social studies and civic education really invites their participation and helps them actually engage around issues that matter to them. I'm pretty sure that's true, but talk about that.
Absolutely. And you know, first I'll point to a few pieces of data that we've seen just in the last few weeks and months. As you know, there's a lot of ink being spilled about Generation Z not being excited about the upcoming election or feeling some resistance around what's going on in our country. And some of that relates to incredibly high degrees of distrust. It's not disengagement, it's not apathy, but a lot of Generation Z distrusts major institutions. But we've also seen, and this has come up in the Harvard Institute of Politics youth poll that happens twice a year. I've seen this in a recent New York Times article that asked a lot of Gen Zers about how they're feeling. And in both cases, they identified that what is missing in civics education in their lives is connection to the real world. And part of what I find frustrating, and I know some of our students find frustrating, we heard this from our Oklahoma students, is that the idea that they shouldn't be engaging with or wrestling with current events in their civics classes, or that some topics should be off limits, is incredibly infantilizing of 14 to 18-year-olds who are very much working, caregiving, fully engaged in their communities, and not only students who are observing or the pail being poured into. They're already very much connected to their community. And so what students are saying, what they're responding to with our curriculum, or what they're saying in lots of spaces is, they want civics education that is relevant and connected to the real world that they are living in. And I think that really, you know, for us, we think about our students not only in their student identity, and that young people are not citizens in waiting until they turn 18, but in fact that they are developing civic maturity and civic readiness from kindergarten, from third grade, and it grows a little each year. It's not a light switch that turns on when they register to vote. And so our education has to meet them where they are developmentally and where they are in terms of their eagerness to participate. And part of the reason I think it's so exciting that, you know, we represent doing this work in elementary, in middle, and in high school is that if we're only asking young people to start participating in their communities once they turn 18 and it's time to vote, then we are absolutely setting ourselves up for the continued hyperpolarization and negativity that many of our over 18 community members find themselves in. But when we're engaging young people as problem solvers in their school, in their neighborhood, in a way that feels actionable, and by the way, is supported by a teacher who knows them and is connected to their friends who they want to be with, that's the moment to help them find and then stay connected to their communities.
I think you've covered that so well, but do either of you want to add to that?
You go ahead now.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Liz, for that. I think that was 100% spot on. And when we also consider accessibility that young people have to information, I have a 19-year-old daughter that since the age of 15 was able to usually tell me what was going on in the world before I even knew about it. And I know so many of us are in like our young people have access to information in ways that we did not. So that's something that we absolutely have to contend with. And when we're telling them that, no, we can't discuss this here, it further marginalizes them, especially when we talk about our young people who are already at the margins. Public school, there are about 50 million young people in public schools. Public schools being a vehicle for civics education is tremendously powerful. And the pivot of, we know it's like, when schools were designed, right? They were designed to be places to create laborers, right? Folks to go into and receive democracy versus contribute to it. And I think that's the shift that we should be fundamentally pushing forward.
I think also our young people are ready. They are impatient. They are looking at the world that we have created and we are contributing to, and they already are thinking through solutions, and they're waiting to be asked. So people ask me all the time, what are young people saying? They are saying, stop making decisions for us without us. We are structuring schools in ways that have been structured the same way since the beginning of public schools. Things aren't working and we're not making changes, and we are not asking the constituents of those institutions what change needs to happen in those spaces. So we keep talking about them. Pre-pandemic, for us in our Action Civics projects, mental health concerns were the #1 concern pre-pandemic. That number has grown significantly in the last 4 years, and we're still struggling, but we've not made the investments. And our young people are looking at us saying, then move out of the way and let us do it. And so I think that is also something we just have to wrestle with. Civics education is not just in the social studies classroom. Schools need to be civic spaces, civic-friendly, youth-friendly spaces, or else young people are going to continue to get frustrated, disenfranchised, and actually they're going to move faster than we're ready for them to move.
We're going to come back to this question of schools as civic spaces in a minute, but I know how important that is. This will date me. I have a 9-year-old grandson who calls me the OG. Right? But occasionally when I'm in Atlanta, I get to drive him to school. And I still remember vividly just a year ago when there was the very close Senate races that were going to determine whether Georgia was red or blue. The TV and the radio was saturated with messages, And don't think that 7, 8, 9-year-old kids aren't hearing all of that and trying to make sense of it. Or there was a war starting in Ukraine. Don't think that Alexander wasn't trying to make sense of it. And he would, in the 12 minutes it takes to get from the house to the school, would raise very provocative questions. And you would hope that in the ride to school isn't the only place that we have ways of talking about these things. All right, we've gone about 30 minutes. I'm going to take the first foray out into the audience to see if possibly we provoked a very short comment or an interesting question or two for this really rich panel. How do they do that? Is there microphones here? They could just come right up to one of these mics if you're so inclined. Tell us who you are.
Hi, Jose Wilson, Educolor, and New York City native. Just a quick comment. I want to just lean into this idea of the teachers too, because too often when it comes to democracy, yes, like there's a set of, and we know what the teacher demographics are like, 80% white, 20% teachers of color. But then when we think about all these anti-CRT laws and all the other stuff, what often happens from the educators that I speak to is that the white educators are often, they become more fearful and stifled, but they stay there for the most part. Whereas the teachers of color are more likely to be fired and or harassed and or harangued. And so when we think about what it means to actually build a democracy with schools in mind, we have to try to also make sure that we keep that nuance there, because so much of our work, especially those of us who are, Black, brown, et cetera, is about creating an inclusive democracy, and you can't be inclusive without including us. So that.
I appreciate that comment. Anybody want to jump on that comment?
I was going to say, in addition to teachers being fired, many teachers of color end up leaving because they want to figure out what action they need to take, that the system itself becomes confining. And so you find people who move more into the school reform space or nonprofit, other space. We actually employ a lot of former teachers who have decided that the structural system doesn't work, but I still very much believe in this work. And I want to execute, and I want to live into my beliefs in a way that this organization, this nonprofit, allows me to do, but the actual school system doesn't change. So they're still staying in the work in many cases. They're just doing it differently. And again, to me, that's a huge risk, especially if we are losing our teachers of color from systems, because we all know the research shows how young people of color respond to teachers of color. So to me, that further amplifies this as a concern.
One of the things that we have been working on this year is a project listening to teachers, and the result of it is going to be called kind of Celebrating Educators as Community Bridge Builders, and it is intentionally meant to understand the teacher experience, particularly in politically contentious environments, and use that both to encourage ways to support those teachers, but also ensuring that we are reflecting on what are the systems that would enable us to have a larger BIPOC civic educator pipeline over the next decade. And so it's an area in which we're eager to collaborate and learn from others as well.
Yeah, just to be brief, I think that's one of the primary reasons why we need organizations like EduColor to support leaders of color, bringing them together, and the coalition building that's essential for us to be able to sustain ourselves to do this long haul work. So I appreciate the question, Jose.
We have another question.
Hi, everyone.
You are?
My name is Rachel Davison Humphreys. I'm Senior Director of Civic Learning Initiatives at a very friendly organization, the Bill of Rights Institute. So we know you pretty well. But thank you for this wonderful panel. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the kind of salutary effects you've seen on the community at large from this work. So kind of the civil society support, the institutional support that engaging young people has on the broader community outside the classroom.
I love that question. Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I didn't mention, but students engage in hands-on civic learning over the course of a semester. It culminates with an event called Civics Day. And Civics Day is a community-wide event where students are presenting on what they've done. And we invite lots of community advisors who are leaders in the community, city council members, folks with foundations, folks with newspapers, and so forth. And that is, yes, an opportunity for our students to be able to share what they have done with folks in a position to support and advance the work. But it is also an important chance to engage community leaders in recognizing and seeing and feeling the civic agency and power of the rising generation. Like, that is a session in which our programming is in many ways aimed at the adults in the room to help them. And what I love in those moments are, we'll have folks come in and they'll be ready to say, oh, this is gonna be cute, this is gonna be great, this is gonna make me feel good. And then they are hearing students present for 10 minutes on their project, and they get challenged, right? I've seen city council members be like, oh, that question was tough. And our students are, by the time they get to Civics Day, they're not intimidated. They understand where people fit in. They've identified their targets in the city. They know who they want to hear from. And so I think that part of the benefit, in addition to the ways in which young people are actually helping solve community problems, which Renee described so beautifully in that example, but it's also making sure that our leaders in communities recognize young people as partners in community problem solving, not as accessories.
Let's go to the next question.
Hello, my name is Matt Baldwin, and I'm from Santa Clara Unified School District in California. We just embarked on ethnic studies for the first year this year, then also getting into the State Seal of Civic Engagement. And so I've been leading that work, and it's been amazing. But we're definitely kind of at this precipice around making sure that we're supporting all of our teachers that are engaging in this work. And you even made the comment about it being across content areas, not just in isolation. And I think I'm struggling, and I think our group is struggling with finding resources in professional development, professional learning, on teaching the adults, all adults in the system, on how to facilitate that process across content areas. And I think, to be honest, October 7th and the conflict with Israel and Hamas has even made that even more challenging, right? And I think, but it's also, I think, put a light on how, as adults, we engage our students in a way and facilitate a process. Because the kids they've always been ready. The kids want to engage, they want to do this. And I'm just seeing adults retreating more and more, especially since October 7th. So I'd love to get your feedback.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. The professional development is so important. We don't drop a curriculum off and say, okay, good luck with that. There's very much time that our team invests, and that professional development is really catered to the local context. So one thing that districts tell us is, we appreciate that you come in and you understand us, that we have a product, but how it is received is different depending on your student population, depending on the politics of the community. So that professional development and teacher coaching is critical, and it's not a one-time workshop and then we go away and come back. It's truly a relationship between the organization and the school district. Just last week, we had several districts calling us because it's Project Soapbox time, and young people are talking about the conflict in Israel, and teachers are panicking because they're like, how are we supposed to address this? And we have staff who are talking them through, and not only talking teachers through that conflict, the tension, but also talking with the administrators. So our original approach was kind of teacher driven. We get a couple teacher partners in the work and we'll work with them. We've learned over time that it really has to be a comprehensive approach to the work, that we're talking to district administrators, departments of social studies or teachers teaching and learning, principals, coaches, mentors that are working across the school district to make sure that teachers feel, again, safe. Just like we want young people to feel safe, teachers have to feel safe enough and have the information that they need. So we actually have some work in California that would love to talk to you further. I have some colleagues on the front row that if you can't catch me, Robin here, Lingo, is our Chief of Strategy and Impact, that we can make sure that we connect you as well.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm from New America, a think tank in DC. And one of the projects we're focusing on, you guys are one of our funders actually. One of the projects we're focusing on is student agency and civic engagement, especially with the upcoming election. And something Elizabeth had said about Gen Z, I'm also a Gen Zer, so I was saying that Gen Z doesn't trust in our institutions, lacks trust in policing, specifically in our elections. And I saw the data you're referencing on my timeline on Twitter, and the first reply was a survey from a Princeton survey from 2014 that basically said that public opinion has almost zero impact on policy change. So given that, how are we trying to bridge the divide where we're saying that voting is still important and voting is still the bedrock of our democracy, but we have data that shows that public opinion has little to zero influence on policy change?
All right, what are we going to do with this one?
It's a great question, and I think one that we're all wrestling with in terms of our relationship and trust in government. I think what I would say is that our focus for young people is so we're inviting them to share what matters to them and what they want to make change on, is starting hyper-local. right? What do you and your friends see on your bus ride home from, from school? What do you talk about? What do you text about? What are the last articles you shared with each other? So making sure that young people's experience and the projects they're working on are grounded in their lived experience, not in the headlines. And that enables them to be proximate experts on issues that they then go and do deep research on and are advocating to local elected officials to make change. And so we are not asking them to begin this journey of civic agency and civic hope by sending a letter to their member of Congress. Because I imagine many of us have not necessarily felt more civically engaged as a result of that. We're asking them to ground in their lived experience, then in the data, right, strong research. But then they are really supported and encouraged to engage targets who are decision makers on the issue, city council, mayor, town council, town communities, and to take on a bite-sized action item that they could really make tangible change in the course of 6 months. And even if the changes they make might sound small, right? A stop sign put up between school and a park because there were a lot of issues with fast cars coming in between. Or helping pass a plastic bag ban in parks in Fall River. Or young people taking on a bigger issue, but being encouraged to add their testimony to a campaign for affordable housing that's been going on for years at a time when it's likely that just a little more grassroots support is going to make a difference. And so young people are encouraged to make change in a way that is hyper-local, that is connected to something they feel deeply passionate about. And when they have a win from that scenario, it enables them to have that level of civic hope that takes them into the bigger moments when they're being asked to add another tool to their toolbox, which is to vote. But I don't think starting only with voting as your only civic tool, especially in a time of high mistrust, is necessarily the best approach. I think getting young people involved in a hyper-local way is a better start.
I'll just add, go ahead. I'll just add to that. As Liz mentioned, we both work in spaces where we're asking young people to learn democracy by doing democracy. So in addition to that hyper-local focus where we're bringing elected officials to our events and putting them in front of young people and allowing them to, again, sort of demystify what that adult decision maker is, who that person is. So really bringing young people closer to positions of power, having them analyze power, really naming that sometimes the policy process is slow and these are the steps. We also have, elections work where students are campaigning and door knocking and, again, understanding those issues so they don't feel so foreign, but they also don't feel so far away. We hosted a youth summit last May in DC. So you talked about us like bringing young people where we took 100 youth to DC and lobbied on Capitol Hill and sat with their elected officials. So instead of just reading in the book that your congressman is this person, we actually brought students from across the country, had them walk the halls and knock on the door and realize that, oh my goodness, I can knock on the door and this person or their staff member will come out and talk to me, and I have the right to talk to this individual just as much as someone who is in a position of power or with a title. So part of our approach is, making what they are learning in the textbooks actually real and actionable. And I have to plug, we had a young person from California actually who sat with her congressperson last May and said, the issue that's most important to me is my family, they're migrant workers. And there's no migrant worker appreciation week. There is now, because this young person told her congresswoman, who then called us back and said, hey, I need to meet that young lady, and they co-authored a bill together. Not only did that young person see the impact of that, her school community saw the impact of that, and all of the young people who were in that room at our summit when that announcement was made. So we've since then had several youth who have been like, well, then I'm gonna call my congressperson too, because there's something else that I need done. And so really putting, it's that those small wins, but actually some big wins that make you keep going and find finding those opportunities and really creating those opportunities so that young people don't lose that hope.
I love that point, Renee, around having young people be able to be more proximate to those current decision makers and also potential ones. I'm gonna go Bronx a little bit because I'm a Bronx cat, and I'm like, anytime I hear about studies, right, that say this, I'm always questioning, are there other studies? Like, I can point to data and other studies that would say something probably directly the contrary to that, right? We can point to specific elections that have happened both nationally and locally where the action that folks have taken has made a huge difference in the outcome, right? So I think it's more elevating those stories and those examples from a hyper-local perspective, but also nationally. So I always caution folks when we start getting into like, this research study said, like, no disrespect, but I'm just like, let's start really figuring out the details and the stories that are happening at the local levels, because we should elevate those other stories of success and power.
Now, I thought the first foray into questions went swimmingly well. And I'm prepared now to entertain a few more, but just a few more, because I have one more sticky question that I need to put to the, let me see what we've got here. Okay, no more, no one else get up. This is good. Go right ahead. Tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Saroja.
Oh, Lord.
I know some of you. I'm a nationally board certified secondary social studies teacher, taught high school social studies for 15 years. And I'm really proud to say I survived teaching world history after 9/11. So I think about the situation my colleagues who are still in the classroom have right now teaching social studies in this context in the world and politically in our country. And it is, some would say more challenging. I think it's just as challenging. I don't think it ever got harder. I think it just has always been hard. I live in proximity to a school district in Virginia that's made national news, and not because necessarily the teachers aren't well prepared, but because there's a lot of resistance from parents in the community to what's being taught in civics and social studies in history classrooms. So I'm curious to hear from each of you a little bit about how you're addressing the resistance that's coming from the homes. Kids don't have a, Grandpa Kent OG to support them at home.
It's interesting. We have developed an educator toolkit so that teachers, and this happened during the pandemic when kids were home and, mom's in the background and here's like, what is happening in that classroom? Also, again, with the school board, situations, pictures, screenshots were taken and brought to school board meetings. So we actually created, with a comms firm, an educator toolkit to give language to say, not to say don't say what you're doing, but here is how to make it, more palatable so that families have a better understanding. We've also coached our district, again, we work, district administrators, teachers, using that toolkit to be able to provide them some additional support and sort of what to say and what not to say. This is, if there ever was a time for crisis comms, this is really the crises that we just continue to be in, and we want to support teachers so that they stay. So that's my short answer to that, is that we've got some additional help on our side so that we can counsel teachers to be able to want to keep coming back.
We did the same.
I think for us, because we're specific school design, what a lot of our parents specifically experience early on is this shift in their child's language, really how they're empowered and encouraged to think for themselves and broadly, and oftentimes, they are blown away, and periodically it can be a bit difficult because of some of the things that their children are now saying and thinking. And it becomes this matter of individual conversations with the parents and family members and caregivers. And it is happening a little bit more often now, Saroja, than it has historically. So we are seeing it, and it's been a lot more individualized. Again, we're in very specific communities. We're also, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to give away the full secret sauce because it's being recorded, but how we pivot our language regionally shifts things and how we enter a particular community. Knowing that we can't say certain things in certain communities, but the work is still absolutely the same. Those trigger words, we try to avoid those in certain places.
Yeah, we're in a world where you can't even use the word equity in some places.
SEL.
You don't struggle with it. Yeah, this is being recorded, right? Next question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sakia Jackson. I run the Expectations Project. We help people of faith do systems level advocacy change, which means we do a lot of civic engagement for adults and educating. And I'm just curious, I think you've spoken to it some, but how do you calm the root fears that you find adults are having and engaging, adults who want to, right, who want to participate, who want to help, and are really taken by really deep-seated fears around their safety and around protecting themselves and protecting young people?
If we're thinking about some of the teachers and administrators and some of their fears, if that's what you're speaking to, I think there are a couple of things that we try to do. Both are connected to the same spirit of not wanting anyone to walk that path alone. And so some of that looks like our team doing deep teacher coaching. So anyone who's engaging in their first 3 years of Generation Citizen is going to have a coach working alongside with them who, by definition, has worked with other teachers who have navigated that. And we're very thoughtful about making sure that we are engaging program managers who have similar experience sets with a similar type of school or so forth. And almost all are former classroom teachers. So they are coaching and guiding, whether it's just because someone's never done project-based learning before, so they're wondering, okay, how do I be a facilitator in this space and not a traditional instructor? Or whether it's connected to a particularly contentious moment, like teaching on January 7th, right? I mean, we know, or on October 8th, I mean, we know that there are crisis moments, and it's important to be able to pick up the phone and talk to someone. And the other is ensuring that teachers are not alone in their schools. And so when we are doing our professional development, or if there are just a handful of teachers in a community that are working together, we try to bring teachers together across schools to ensure that they know about each other as a community of practice and a community of support, so that they have others who they can check in with and call in on. We also have a teacher leadership board at our organization level that checks us to make sure that we are being as thoughtful as we need to be in terms of our support for teachers, and gives us a pulse of how different moments might be hitting in the classroom that we might not be feeling directly.
I'll just add, we also have professional learning communities across districts, and one is the administrator community. So our lead in the departments of education across some of what we call our partner districts meet together and collaborate together. So then you don't feel so isolated. Very similar, you know, how we go in these other spaces and we feel connected, trying to provide those opportunities through, whether it's through our Summer Teacher Institute, where we bring teachers from across the country, or these professional learning communities in addition. So there's additional spaces for people to talk and understand and support each other.
All right, let's see if we can get this last question.
Hi, my name is Kelly Lewis. I'm a professor of mathematics at Houston-Tillotson University, right down the road. So my question is, have you found either collectively or even like in individual classrooms, when you focus on non-enumerated rights, which are the rights covered in Amendment number 19, and when you focus on those, everything else falls into line. So for example, in my class, I focus on you have the right to make mistakes, you have the right to be confused, you have the right to ask questions. And then when I focus on those that are not literally defined somewhere else, then everything else, everybody's happy politically, and everything else just falls into line.
Did you understand that question?
I mean, that sounds like a tip. That sounds like something you're telling us that we can share with teachers. I hadn't thought about it that way or heard that necessarily, but I think that sounds smart.
I was going to say, I don't know a setting right now where everybody's happy politically, but would love to better understand.
Right. Okay. In the 5 minutes we have left, and let me just say, I've got more than 5 minutes. The clock says I have 5 minutes.
We started early.
All right. Well, let's keep going. I worry about our ability to support teachers if the schools they're in don't think of themselves as civic spaces, if they don't fundamentally understand that they're in democratic organizations. And I'm sort of curious if that tension exists for all of you. And it would be great to talk a little bit about the need possibly to think about schools differently. This is the conference for school people, South by Southwest. This is about innovation and the like. And so I want this conversation at this point to look out in time as opposed to looking around and get you all to talk about the schools we need relative to the schools we have. And then maybe I'll come back to ask a South by Southwest-like question, which would be, how do you scale that, right? But let's start with let's take up the first order question about what do we need? Carlos wants to think about it.
I'll jump in with something that's not fully baked. So, folks are always talking about how our young people are coming up, right? They're up next. Well, actually, they're here. They're fully here, and they are beginning to step in a lot of really amazing and beautiful and necessary ways, given what's happening in the context in our world. There's an African proverb that I love that says that a child that is not embraced by his, hers, or their village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I believe that it is incumbent upon us to think about what that means if we're oppressing or suppressing information and opportunities for conversations to happen in these spaces that are supposed to be about not, preparing young people for what's next, which includes being active contributors to their communities. It's not a full response, right? I'm going, right? But it's actually what I think is the work that's necessary moving forward, is to how do we continue, and again, leveraging public schools that serve, currently 50 million young people in K-12.
That's very much a full response. I worry, especially in high schools, Carlos, that if kids know what they want, and that if we don't figure out how to give it to them and give them work that's actually worth doing, they will leave. They'll get it someplace else. But Liz, what say you about how to move toward the schools we need?
Yeah, a couple of things I would add in addition to Carlos's point about belonging and what students need. One is that schools and systems cannot both be a pipeline to prison for some and a pipeline to the public square for those same kids. it cannot happen. So schools that are adopting approaches that mimic the carceral state are not creating conditions where young people will thrive civically. And so that is one of the things that we cannot try to do side by side. The other thing I would say is, in addition to believing that every young person should have the kind of action civics experience, right? I think every student should graduate after doing a civic capstone project that connects them to their communities. But I also think we need real commitments to recognizing youth voice in governance. So right now that looks like ensuring that school boards have not only a seat or a few that include students, but ensuring that young people can vote for members of the school board, and not only vote for the youth representative, but be engaged in school board elections. It's great to see New Jersey taking a powerful step in that direction just a few weeks ago, where Newark is now the largest city in the country that will have young people, 16, 17-year-olds, to vote for school board. But that's a part of it too, right? Is ensuring that young people see that these opportunities for civic voice and leadership aren't only academic exercises, but they are in fact truly a pathway to civic leadership.
So Renee, as you speak to this, just comment on what it would take for these things to happen in a bigger way. I don't know if it's better standards, if it's using time and space differently, but what would you say?
Sure. One of the things we prioritize at MIC for Challenge is that schools and districts, like not just the individual buildings, should have some sort of a youth voice infrastructure, that there is a space, there's an opportunity for young people, whether it is on a school board, whether it is on a student voice committee, which we operate in several districts, DC, Rochester, New York, so young people are able to get to the positions of power. In some cities, we have young people who are advising the CEO of schools, so Chicago Public Schools' current CEO, and especially the former CEO, Janice Jackson, would say, as I am making decisions about schools and policies that are happening, I'm bringing them in front of young people and sort of testing it out before I make the decision. Arnie Duncan, the former Secretary of Education, when he was CEO of schools, talked about the importance of youth voice. So it's like we've got a formula out there. It is having the political will or whatever space for young people to be able to contribute to decisions that are made about them. So, and even school structure, just having spaces. Teachers are able to do it in the classrooms, where teachers set norms together with their young people as thinking about how we do school together. What if schools and districts spent more time with, again, their most valued constituents, saying, hey, what's wrong? Why is attendance down? Why are you late? What is happening? I'll just give one final piece. Our school report card in Chicago a few years ago, our students said, the school gets a name, a grade, but it doesn't reflect my experience in that school. And so our students were actually able to be a part of the committee that determined how schools were graded in the city. So how are we inviting young people in to be a part of those processes as they evaluate schools?
I hope you all appreciate why we put this panel together. All right? I want you to give me a round of applause for Carlos, Liz, and Renee. And we've all enjoyed being with you. Thank you all very much.